Only 23 days remained before my postgraduate entrance exam when my father suddenly called me and asked whether the college I was applying to was close to home, and whether I could come back home to prepare for the exam. Thinking about it, I had already been staying at college for more than a year because I remained there during the winter and summer vacations to work on projects. My parents must have missed me. Besides, I would have to return home for the exam anyway, so I immediately decided to take leave and go home to study. I had heard my parents say that they had bought a small villa in a newly developed area, renovated it, and moved in. But when I arrived, I discovered that our new home was actually located in a deserted part of City A. City A was divided by a river. The northern side of the river was the urban area, and the vast majority of the city's residents lived there. The southern side had previously been undeveloped mountains. Recently, the government had leveled part of the mountains and built a new urban district, but it had not yet been developed. There were only a few factories and delivery warehouses. There were no entertainment facilities on the southern side. Our residential community was newly developed and was also the only residential community on the southern side. It consisted of rows of small villas, all of which looked almost identical. The houses had just been completed, and almost nobody had moved in yet. It was a true suburb. As soon as I arrived home and put down my luggage, I excitedly dragged my parents around to explore our newly purchased villa. It was a 3-story villa with a basement and a small yard. The house wasn't particularly large either. The first floor was used for parking. My parents each had a car, and after I got my driver's license, they had bought me one too. So there were 3 cars parked on the first floor, along with a room filled with miscellaneous items. The second floor had a master bedroom, a secondary bedroom, a guest room, and 2 studies. The third floor was a large living room and kitchen. After roughly looking over the layout, my father quietly asked me if I wanted to see the basement. I immediately agreed and followed Dad downstairs. We walked toward the storage room on the first floor. When we opened the door, I saw some old household appliances from the previous house, some wood, and a storage cabinet. There was nothing unusual. I looked around in confusion. "Didn't you say we were going to see the basement?" Dad mysteriously lowered his voice. "This is the entrance to the basement. This basement was specially built. It stores expensive wine and some confidential things." After saying that, Dad opened the storage cabinet. I peeked inside and saw some old clothes. Dad approached the cabinet, pushed the clothes aside, and pressed somewhere inside. Suddenly, the back of the cabinet shifted slightly, revealing a hidden door. Dad went in first and turned on the light. I hurried after him. Inside was a small room with only one door. A door inside a door. "Come on, sweetheart, go and enter the password." "The password is your birthday." "Yes." Excited, I walked toward the door, entered the password, and turned the handle. But the door didn't open. When I turned around, Dad had already walked out. I suddenly realized it. What a shock. Even this was just a decoy. I came out of the cabinet and saw that Dad had already walked behind the abandoned household appliances. I widened my eyes. There was an entrance in the floor. Wasn't this already far beyond simply protecting against thieves? I followed the stairs all the way down. At the end was a thick-looking metal door with a heavy lock hanging from it. I knocked on the iron door. The deep metallic sound made me realize that the door was solid and extremely thick. Dad took out a key and unlocked it. The two of us had to push the door together to open it. The doubts and uneasiness in my heart grew stronger. This definitely wasn't built just to keep thieves out. Then what was it for? "You go inside and take a look. I'll go upstairs and call your mother down. We have something to discuss with you." Dad looked at me seriously as I stood at the iron door. He patted my head and turned around, walking back toward the first floor. I stood at the iron door, and 100 possibilities flashed through my mind. Silently, I walked deeper into the basement. The lights weren't particularly bright, but after seeing the layout of the basement, I became genuinely anxious. This basement definitely wasn't something that came with the residential community. Its size was practically that of a huge air raid shelter. The basement was almost completely filled with large and small boxes stacked on top of one another, leaving only narrow paths leading to several rooms. I scanned the place roughly. There were instant noodles of various flavors, compressed biscuits, different kinds of canned food, oatmeal, cooking oil, seasonings, flour, rice, miscellaneous grains, noodles, rice noodles, toiletries, and other necessities. There weren't many snacks. I estimated conservatively that, as long as none of these supplies expired, they should be enough for our family to eat for 7 or 8 years. I didn't touch any of the supplies. Instead, I walked toward the room closest to me. There were 6 rooms in total, but there were only 3 people in our family. If 2 rooms were used for living, what were the remaining rooms for? The door to this room was also made of iron. It wasn't as thick as the basement entrance and didn't have a lock. I pushed it open. It was completely dark. There were no windows and not a trace of light could enter. It was like an open mouth, and an overwhelming feeling of suffocation and helplessness climbed over me. I didn't know where the light switch was. I could only stand there blankly, staring into the darkness. Was this a safe room? What was it used for? The pandemic was impossible to rule out. Every possibility had to be considered. And the final possibility, no matter how impossible it seemed, could only be the truth. I thought my parents must have heard some kind of warning. I closed the door and quietly stood there until I heard my parents' footsteps. Is it zombies? I don't know, we don't really know either. Mom shook her head. Zhizhai, listen to me, do you remember your second cousin from your uncle's family? I remembered him. Didn't he go abroad to study? He's working as an assistant in a biochemical laboratory now. 2 months earlier, he had sent a message to my uncle. He said that their laboratory had discovered the corpse of a gorilla in a cave. The researchers brought the corpse back for examination and discovered that it contained a prehistoric virus. The virus was fatal to gorillas, and they still hadn't completely understood how it caused disease. They stored the corpse in a sterile, temperature-controlled container. At that time, my cousin called me and told me to prepare myself. He felt that something about the corpse wasn't right. If a prehistoric virus had infected a monkey, how could the corpse remain completely intact without decomposing? He urged his supervisor to stop the research, but nobody listened to him. Dad spoke while taking out his phone and handing it to me. It was his conversation with my cousin. 3 days earlier, my cousin had sent a voice message. The corpse has come back to life, it's going crazy, we're losing contact, there's 1 week left. His voice was broken and intermittent. I seemed to hear roaring and crying in the background. We contacted your uncle, they bought an abandoned water tower in the mountains in the countryside, they plan to stay there for a while. My mind went blank. Our peaceful life was about to end. When I came back to my senses, I rushed forward and hugged my parents. Fortunately, in the apocalypse, our family was still together. That should count as the greatest happiness in the apocalypse, right? Dad patted my shoulder. Our stockpiling mission isn't finished yet. Your mother and I could only think of a limited number of supplies. We also don't dare to post online asking for advice. We're afraid someone might trace our address and that would be too dangerous for our family. Yes, the scariest thing in the apocalypse isn't the blood-covered zombies, it's human nature. Wherever there are people, there will be schemes and conflict. Dad, you did the right thing. So should we go buy supplies now? Yes, there are too many things to buy, let's go. We'll split up, there are only 3 days left, we'll buy as much as we can. We can't have them delivered to the new house. I quickly stopped my parents. When you stocked up on supplies before, nobody discovered anything, right? Mom gave me a reassuring smile. Don't worry. Your father told me not to reveal our address. Apart from you, we haven't told anyone about the new house. We had everything delivered to our old house, making everyone think that's where we lived. Then, at night, we drove the supplies here. I breathed a sigh of relief. I hadn't expected Dad to be so clever. Of course. Dad took one of my hands and one of Mom's. Come on, let's hurry and continue buying supplies. The 3 of us split up. We divided the task simply. Dad would buy the equipment needed to maintain basic living conditions. Mom would buy household necessities. I would continue buying food. After separating from my parents, I drove to the largest warehouse supermarket in our area. It was Wednesday, so there weren't too many people. I rushed to the snack aisle. Looking at all the different snacks on the shelves, I fell into deep thought. First, I didn't know whether zombies were sensitive to smells or sounds. So I wouldn't buy hot pot, snail noodles, and similar foods that people discussed online. They would be difficult to process and their smell could easily attract other people. If someone discovered that there were people living in our villa, then we would be the ones in danger. Next, I immediately gave up chips and other snacks that took up a lot of space and made noise while eating. Spicy strips were out too. After eating them, I would need water to relieve the spiciness. Water would be extremely precious in the apocalypse. Biscuits were no good either, they were too dry and would require a lot of water. Jelly was out because it took up space and wasn't filling enough. After going through the snack section, I only took some dried beef, pork jerky, and various dried fruits. They could provide energy without taking up too much space. I didn't know how much storage space we had, so I still wanted to buy things with good value. Next, I went to the vegetable section. Looking at all the fresh green vegetables gave me a headache. Vegetables had a relatively short shelf life. If stored for too long, they would become slimy and spoil. But we couldn't stop eating vegetables either. I decided not to buy vegetables for now and discuss with my parents how we could solve the vegetable problem. Next was the frozen food section. I roughly walked around. Pork, beef, chicken, seafood. Everything in the frozen section that we needed. I didn't take each item individually because there wasn't enough time and I couldn't carry that much anyway. Finally, I reached the rice and flour section. I selected the kinds of noodles, rice noodles, dumplings, and wontons we needed and took one package of each. Then I pushed my shopping cart straight to the manager's office. I told the manager that I wanted 10 of every item in my shopping cart. As soon as he heard it was a large order, the manager hurriedly accompanied me around the supermarket. I pointed to the frozen food section and told him what I needed. 30 pounds of pork. 30 pounds of beef. 30 pounds of fish. 10 pounds of squid. 10 pounds of shrimp. I also bought some other seafood. I figured we could eat some of it that night. After that, I selected 20 bags of rice and 20 bags of flour. Cooking oil, salt, soy sauce, vinegar, dark soy sauce, light soy sauce, cooking wine, and various spices. I ordered 5 boxes of each. After paying, I left the address of the old house for delivery. Then I drove to the old house and waited there. While waiting, I also ordered dozens of boxes of instant noodles through a food delivery app. 10 minutes later, one truck after another drove into our yard and unloaded everything there. I didn't want them to enter the house. After all, most of the things in this house had already been moved out. We couldn't let them know that we actually didn't live there. After a busy afternoon, the yard was packed full. When I was leaving, I heard several workers joking. Buying this much stuff, what if it gets robbed? People might get jealous. My heart skipped a beat. We had to act quickly. These workers knew that there were supplies here. After the zombies arrived, was it possible that they would drive here to rob the supplies? We had to move everything in secret. We absolutely couldn't be discovered. I called my parents and asked when they would come to move the supplies. They told me to stay in the old house and wait until midnight. I removed the surveillance camera from the living room and installed it in an inconspicuous place in the yard where it could still clearly record the entire area. I sat motionless in the living room, monitoring everything outside on my phone. It was already dark. I hadn't turned on the yard lights. The walls surrounded the yard, so from outside, people should only be able to see the supplies piled inside without being able to tell what was there. Thankfully, we had to finish transporting everything under the cover of darkness. Around 1 in the morning, I was awakened by a phone call. Dad and Mom arrived. The 3 of us moved quietly and took turns driving the vehicles to transport the supplies. Because ours was the only family living in the community, there was no security guard at night. Our cars also entered through license plate recognition, so nobody noticed us. After working all night, we finally moved all the food. I didn't have the energy to count it. I didn't have the energy to check what my parents had prepared either. The moment I lay down, I fell asleep. When I woke up in the morning, I opened the curtains. The sunlight was shining on the grass outside. It looked nothing like the scene before the apocalypse. I went to the third floor and found that Mom and Dad had already prepared breakfast. While eating, I asked about how we would deal with vegetables. Mom suggested that we grow some vegetables in the yard. She said that in zombie stories, people always grew vegetables to maintain their vitamin intake. Besides, the walls surrounding the yard should make it relatively safe. I thought about it. No. If someone comes, our family will hide in the basement. They'll enter the house and find nobody there, but then they'll see freshly grown vegetables, food, and cars. Wouldn't that make it obvious that someone is hiding here? And if we're living this comfortably, they'll also guess that we have a lot of supplies. That would be too dangerous. Dad agreed with me. Then what about reinforcing the walls? I shook my head. Our community has a unified design. We shouldn't change the exterior. Keeping everything looking the same can maximize our ability to hide among the empty houses. Our house is toward the back. If someone comes to rob supplies, they might search the first few villas. They may assume that nobody lives in the houses farther back and give up searching. That is the most advantageous disguise for us. I briefly explained my thoughts to my parents. First, we should keep the villa in its original condition and not add anything unusual. Zombies wouldn't be afraid of walls, so the normal walls were enough to keep zombies out. Second, having 3 cars parked on the first floor was too obvious. If intruders discovered that we were the only family living here, they might stay in our house for the remaining supplies. That would increase the danger of them discovering us hiding in the basement. Third, the basement's ventilation system required electricity. If only our house had solar panels, it would be too obvious. It would be better to buy several more panels and install them on every house. That would not only store more energy, but also reduce the risk of exposing ourselves. Fourth, regarding water, we should stockpile bottled water. Fortunately, since we were in a basement, we didn't need to worry about the building's load-bearing capacity. We could simply stockpile large quantities. We could also have water collection facilities, but we should use them as little as possible and only when absolutely necessary. Fifth, regarding vegetables, we could buy more over the next few days and eat them while they were fresh. The rest could be made into pickled vegetables and preserved vegetables. Later, we would have to rely on dried vegetables. Soaking dried vegetables in water would be the only solution. Sixth, we needed to buy several large freezers. The fish, meat, and other food we bought could be stored in them for some time. Mom and Dad were shocked as they listened to my plan. They were also pleased. Our daughter has grown up, you're thinking about things much more thoroughly now. Don't worry, your dad has already taken care of the freezers and water. The basement walls have also been reinforced and soundproofed. I just know you haven't seen all the supplies in the basement yet. Today let your dad go out and buy supplies. You and I will stay home and count everything. If anything is missing, we'll have Dad buy it. Although your cousin said we have about a week left, we can't know the exact date. It's better not to go outside too much recently. So Mom and I went into the basement again while Dad went out to buy solar panels. Only after entering the basement did I realize just how many supplies we had stored. The other 4 rooms in the basement had all been used to store water and freezers. The room I had opened earlier was almost completely filled with water. The water containers were all 16-liter household containers. There was barely any room to walk inside and count them. 3 of the 4 rooms were used entirely for water. The remaining room contained 4 custom-made large refrigerators. They were all double-door models. Each refrigerator had 2 sides. Both had huge capacities. The left side was a 50-liter independent refrigerator. The right side was a 450-liter independent freezer. The refrigerators were already filled with meat, fresh vegetables, and fruit. Worried that the electricity supply might not be enough, Mom and I decided to use all of them for storage first. Once the power went out, we would turn off 2 of the refrigerators. As for the large open space in the basement, we divided it into different areas. We took out the food and organized everything. Including what I bought yesterday, we had a total of 120 bags of rice, 120 bags of flour, 50 boxes of noodles with 10 packages in each box, 30 boxes of rice noodles with 9 packages in each box, 20 boxes of wontons with 5 packages in each box, 20 boxes of dumplings with 5 packages in each box. For instant noodles of various flavors, we had 20 boxes of each flavor with 24 bags in each box. 5 boxes of each type of seasoning. 10 containers of cooking oil. 5 boxes of compressed biscuits. 10 bags of mixed grains and rice. 10 boxes of various canned foods. 50 bags of oatmeal. 10 boxes of pork jerky. 10 boxes of dried beef. 10 boxes of dried fruit. And the frozen meat products we bought yesterday. That was all the food. There were more staple foods and not many snacks. Later, we would definitely reduce the number of times we showered. I didn't want to occupy too much space in the basement. So I sorted through the toiletries Mom had bought. We kept 5 bottles of shampoo, 5 bottles of shower gel, 5 tubes of toothpaste, 10 toothbrushes, 6 packs of facial cleanser, 10 bath towels, and 6 bottles of body wash. The rest were moved upstairs into the study. I only put 1 bed and 1 table in the study. There was no wardrobe, only a clothes rack. There were several sets of clothes for spring, summer, autumn, and winter. I wouldn't be able to wear beautiful clothes anymore. It was a little regrettable. Each room had a bathroom. The bathrooms only had a squat toilet and a shower. But considering the size of the rooms, I thought they were quite good. As long as we could sleep, that was enough. After all, there was almost no space left for supplies. The basement also had an open kitchen with all the normal kitchen utensils. Because there was no sunlight, we hadn't prepared a place to dry clothes. Mom said we could secretly hang clothes outside when nobody was around and quickly bring them back in. I called Dad and asked him to buy several more cameras. The smaller the cameras, the better. We planned to install them in several corners of the community so that we could clearly know whenever someone arrived. Then we moved down duvets, cotton blankets, and other warm bedding from upstairs. We didn't know how long we would have to live in the basement. We placed a small sofa in the center of the basement. I also moved my treasured projector and entire gaming setup into the basement. That night, we could watch television shows and movies we'd never get tired of. Our family could chat, watch TV, and play games here. Looking at the completely stocked basement, I was happy, but there was also anxiety mixed with that happiness. What if we were discovered? There were only 3 of us. But if the intruders were a group of strong men carrying firearms, we probably wouldn't be able to resist them. So I placed the diesel generator and other large mechanical equipment near the door. If we needed to open the door, we could move them aside. Otherwise, it would be almost impossible for anyone outside to push open the heavy iron door. I had to be extremely careful. I had to protect my parents. After cleaning up the basement, it became dark outside. We returned upstairs. Mom went into the kitchen to prepare dinner. Seeing that Dad still hadn't returned, I picked up my phone and started scrolling through Weibo. Suddenly a trending topic appeared. Catch zombies. My heart tightened. Had the zombies already appeared? I clicked on it. A blogger had written only 1 sentence. The apocalypse is coming, zombies have already appeared. There was no video and no reply. There was only that 1 sentence. I looked at it again. The IP address showed the same country where my cousin was. Just as I was wondering whether the infection had spread faster and had already reached us, the door opened. Dad came back carrying more than a dozen boxes of cameras. I went to many stores, I could only buy these few pinhole cameras. I was delighted. With pinhole cameras, we wouldn't have to worry about exposing ourselves. I planned to walk around the community several times that night, draw a rough map, and install pinhole cameras outward from our house. After dinner, Dad and I walked around the community carrying a hammer and a knife. We went around once and discovered that, apart from us, there really was nobody else living there. At the same time, we discovered that because the houses had only recently been handed over, most of the villa gates weren't locked. We could enter the villas and install solar panels without anyone noticing. As we walked, we used our phones to take pictures and record the routes. After walking around 3 times, we returned home and drew a map of the community. We marked the villas whose doors were open. Mom and Dad planned to act that night. They would install solar panels on the other villas. Then they would connect them to a central battery system and connect our home's electrical wiring to the same battery system. That way, we could use the solar panels installed on the other houses as well. I carried the pinhole cameras connected to my phone and wandered around the community. Whenever I saw a suitable location, I installed a camera. I also installed one at the main entrance of the community. After the solar panels and cameras were installed, we returned home. I showed Weibo to my parents. The trending topic had already been deleted. Dad thought for a moment. Tomorrow will be our last trip outside to buy supplies. I'll buy some controlled items. Wife, you go to the hospital or pharmacy and buy some medicine. Anti-inflammatory medicine, cold medicine, stomach medicine, painkillers. Buy as much as you can but visit several different pharmacies so you don't attract suspicion. Zhizhai, continue buying food, you can buy some snacks you like. And buy some cat litter. We'll meet at the old house. After we finish moving everything at night, leave your cars at the old house, don't drive them back. Thinking that tomorrow would be the last day before the apocalypse when we could go outside, my heart felt heavy. What would this world become? With tomorrow's tasks on my mind, I slowly fell asleep. When I woke up in the morning, my parents had already left. I quickly grabbed some bread and drove to a supermarket. I didn't go to the supermarket we'd visited before. The employees there already knew me, so going there again could make me recognizable and attract attention. I went to another large supermarket and bought a large amount of my favorite snacks. I even took 2 large bottles of cola. I also bought 5 bags of cat litter. This time I was simply buying snacks, so I didn't need to be as careful about being discovered. After paying, I walked out toward the parking garage. Then I noticed a large crowd gathered in the distance. I didn't know what they were talking about. To prevent any accident, I quickly walked to my car and put everything into the trunk. I sat in the driver's seat. After confirming that all the doors were closed, I slowly drove toward the crowd. There were too many people, so I had to stop farther away. I rolled down the window and asked a middle-aged man standing nearby what had happened. Several young foreign men drove here. As soon as they got out of the car, they collapsed one after another. They're even convulsing. An ambulance has already been called. Girl, don't go any closer, it's frightening. The man explained gently while carrying 2 large shopping bags. Foreigners, convulsing. When I heard those keywords, I was shocked. I was about to speed away and raise my window when I caught sight of 2 cans of infant formula inside the man's shopping bags. You should go home too, they've been saying it's a bad cold these days. It's safer to buy more food and stock up at home. The man lifted the shopping bags. Yes, I should go back and make something good for my daughter. He walked toward his car. I hurriedly called my parents. While driving, I explained what had happened. 4 foreign men were lying on the ground outside the supermarket, convulsing. White foam was coming from their mouths. Everyone had just finished shopping and come out of the supermarket. People were carrying large and small shopping bags. Some were gathered around just to watch. Did anyone call an ambulance? They just called one, they said it's coming soon. I also called 110, the police have already been dispatched. There's so much chaos. But nobody went forward to help. I'm a doctor, make way. At that moment a man stepped forward. He walked toward the person who was convulsing the most severely. With one hand supporting his head and the other opening his eyelid, he examined him. His eyes were filled with red blood vessels. Those blood vessels seemed almost alive, slowly moving inside his eyes. The man frowned and wanted to continue examining him. Suddenly, the foreign man who was convulsing spat out a mouthful of thick black blood and collapsed sideways onto the ground. Hello, where does it hurt? The man reached out and lightly patted him, preparing to straighten his body. You can talk to me. Before he could finish, the foreign man suddenly sat up and bit into the man's neck. No matter how hard the man struggled, he tore off a piece of flesh from his neck. The crowd suddenly erupted into screams. Everyone began running desperately. But there were too many people, and they were carrying things. The people in the middle couldn't move quickly. At that moment, the other people who had been convulsing on the ground also spat out blood. They immediately climbed up and lunged at the nearest people, biting into the people beneath them. They tore flesh from their bodies. Blood sprayed everywhere. After finishing their attacks, they immediately stood up and lunged at another person. The scene became completely chaotic. Everyone was running. Nobody noticed that the man who had been bitten first had also fallen to the ground and begun convulsing. When I drove the car into the garage of the old house, I saw my parents anxiously packing around the empty yard. As soon as I opened the car door, Mom tightly hugged me. "Jijai, we were so worried about you." I comforted her and patted her back, telling her to calm down. I hadn't expected the zombie outbreak to be so close to us. I signaled Dad to open the trunk. We first moved the supplies into his car. While we were moving the cat litter, the neighbor next door came out. He smiled and watched us carry the things. "Did you go shopping? What delicious things did you buy?" Dad was about to put the cat litter into his trunk. But his movement suddenly changed. He placed it on the ground as if he had just taken it out of the trunk. Then he slightly exposed the cat litter so that the neighbor could see it. He casually said, "Jijai wants to raise a cat, so we bought some cat litter and a cat bed." The neighbor looked at the cat litter and nodded. "Next time have Jijai bring the kitten over, come over for dinner." Then he collected some clothes from the yard and went inside. I breathed a sigh of relief. Mom also realized what Dad had done. Together we moved all the supplies. After finishing, we got into Dad's car and left. On the road, cars were speeding everywhere. People were running around. There were cries and screams coming from all directions. Suddenly a car ahead lost control. It didn't slow down at the turn and crashed into a shop beside the road. A few seconds later, a woman with a bleeding shoulder opened the car door and staggered out. Her clothes were torn. Her hair was messy. Her face was covered in blood. Her eyes were red. She didn't look like a normal person. Her mouth had been torn open, with the wound extending all the way toward her ear. When she saw our car, she charged toward us without hesitation. Our car was also moving quickly, and there was no time to slow down. She slammed directly into the driver's side door. Her face pressed against the window. Her torn mouth looked as though she were smiling. It was extremely eerie. She grabbed the car handle. The window was about to break. I pointed toward the crack. "Bad Dad, there's a turn ahead." Dad immediately understood what I meant. He suddenly turned the steering wheel. The car drove onto the sidewalk, passing extremely close to the wall. I could even hear the female zombie's back scraping against the wall. At the turn, Dad stepped hard on the accelerator and forced the zombie off the car. We all breathed a sigh of relief. We had finally shaken her off. But the car window probably couldn't withstand another impact. Fortunately, nothing else happened on the rest of the journey. We safely reached the entrance of our community. There were two gates at the entrance. One was a sliding iron gate. The other was a barrier gate. Because there was still no security guard in the community, the iron gate was normally left open for convenience. Only the barrier gate was used. Once the license plate was recognized, the barrier would rise. "Wait. We need to close the iron gate now. There aren't many zombies yet, this is the best time to close it." Dad nodded and prepared to get out with me. "No, Dad, you stay in the car. If anything happens, you need to be able to drive away immediately." "I'll close it." I carefully observed the surroundings. I opened the car door and quickly walked toward the iron gate. I pushed it with all my strength. Because the gate had been closed too quickly, it made a sharp, piercing sound. Finally, I locked the iron gate. Once everything was done, we left. We carried the supplies from the car into the basement one by one. We locked the yard gate. We covered the large furniture in the villa with dust covers, making it look as though nobody lived there. We also covered the cars with protective covers. That way, the broken glass would be less noticeable. Our family's life in the basement had officially begun. After everything that had happened that morning, I was completely exhausted. Once I reached the basement, I collapsed onto the sofa and scrolled through my phone. Mom and Dad were in the kitchen preparing lunch. All the major news media were reporting the zombie outbreak everywhere. Even Weibo's trending searches no longer had celebrity entertainment news. 8 of the top 10 searches were about zombies. There was also a post from someone who said that yesterday, he had ordered takeout late at night and fallen asleep. When he woke up, he ordered food. After the delivery worker dropped off the food, he ran back and desperately knocked on his door. He was a girl and was afraid, so she didn't open the door. The delivery worker eventually left. Only now had she seen the zombie news. She apologized to the delivery man and hoped he could save himself first. Fortunately, she was a fat guy who liked playing games and had already stocked up on a lot of food, so he should be able to survive this period. Another post said, "Desperately seeking supplies, the friend upstairs look at my ID." Someone replied that they seemed to have seen a zombie-related post a few days ago. Was it my imagination? Did someone predict this? Another person said they had noticed that a supermarket had supplies and asked people with money to contact them privately. Everyone was discussing the trending topic. I was also casually scrolling through Weibo when I saw a comment. At Want to Earn Millions, a few days ago a young girl ordered a huge amount of food at our supermarket. We originally thought it was for a company annual meeting. Thinking about it now, she probably stocked up on supplies in advance. Damn it. I nervously opened the replies. Give me the address. Same question. Why should she be allowed to hoard everything alone? That's selfish. If you know who she is, tell us. Why didn't you say something earlier? If everyone knew, they could have stocked up and stayed home. Too selfish. Don't let me find out who she is. I opened the profile of the person who had posted the comment. The IP address showed that they weren't in City A. My tense heart finally relaxed. It seemed that other people had also prepared for this crisis in advance. The smell of food from the kitchen drifted toward me and eased the tension in my heart. I had never been a great philanthropist. Nor was I a savior. In the apocalypse, my only wish was for my family to live safely. The authorities also released a message. All citizens, stay inside your homes and do not go outside. Ensure your own safety as much as possible. The military will conduct rescue operations on the streets. Do not believe or spread rumors. The top comment under the trending topic was, "At the person who likes you most, the supermarket has supplies. If you have money, contact me privately." I opened the replies. How dare you make money from a national disaster? Have you gone crazy for money? Aren't you afraid your address will be leaked and people will come after you? The person replied, "Bro, come and chop me. The supermarket's security equipment isn't something you can break into. Come on, I'm not afraid of you." I frowned. Wasn't announcing to everyone that he had supplies like this dangerous? Wouldn't something happen to him? I continued thinking about it until Mom called me for dinner. Her gentle voice pulled me back to reality. I put down my phone and happily went to eat. After dinner and washing the dishes, we sat on the sofa eating snacks and watching television. Suddenly, the alarm from the surveillance system on my phone went off. I remembered that when I had been waiting at the old house for my parents to arrive and move the supplies, I had moved the surveillance camera to a hidden location in the yard. Someone had come to the house. I opened the surveillance feed. A man wearing home clothes was holding a sharp fruit knife. He climbed over the wall from the neighboring yard into ours. The moment his feet touched the ground, he hid the knife behind his back. He quietly moved along the wall toward the main entrance. It was our neighbor. What was he trying to do? The neighbor tightly gripped the knife and knocked on our front door. When nobody answered, he walked toward the floor-to-ceiling window on the balcony. I knew immediately what he wanted to do. Our house and the neighbor's house had almost the same layout. He quickly figured out that if the balcony's floor-to-ceiling window wasn't locked from the inside, he could enter. The window opened. He looked left and right suspiciously. Even through the surveillance camera, I could clearly see the cunning smile on his face after he succeeded. He climbed inside. The living room camera had been removed, but I could imagine what happened next. After entering and discovering that the house had been almost completely emptied, he must have been furious. That morning, when he had seen us returning from shopping, he had smiled at us and even invited me to dinner. But that afternoon, he had secretly entered our house carrying a knife. This was human nature in the apocalypse. Was there still anything left in the house? Dad also stared intently at the surveillance footage. Some supplies that were close to expiring and couldn't be transported in time were left there. I knew Dad was also afraid. If we hadn't left the old house, we would have been the ones facing that knife. Our entire family. He had really gotten lucky. The neighbor stole some food. Not long afterward, his furtive figure appeared again on the surveillance camera. Both of his hands were filled with supplies. He threw them over the wall and then returned inside to continue carrying more. Around the fourth trip, someone knocked on the iron gate of the yard. Well, this was getting lively. I took some sunflower seeds from my snack bag and watched the scene like a show. The neighbor trembled in fear. The bag in his hand fell to the ground with a sound. The people outside heard it. They began banging on the gate even more violently. "Ma'am, I heard someone inside. And I heard the sound of bags. They're probably counting supplies. Open the door. Don't make me break in. Don't play games with us." I couldn't see what was happening outside the gate. But judging from the voices, there seemed to be a group of strong men. And there was more than one. I could only see the neighbor's thin body trembling in the yard. He quietly returned to the floor-to-ceiling window, slowly climbed back inside, locked it, and disappeared. The strong men received no response. They became even angrier. I didn't know what they did outside, but the large iron gate of the yard began shaking from their impacts. After more than 10 minutes, the gate could no longer withstand them. It was broken open. During all this time, I didn't see the neighbor come out. So he was still hiding inside our house. 5 or 6 men rushed in. Each of them was strong and muscular. Every one of them carried a weapon: knives, clubs, shovels, and other tools. I narrowed my eyes and carefully looked at their faces. They seemed familiar. I had probably seen them somewhere over the past few days. But I couldn't remember where. They pointed at the bags the neighbor had dropped on the ground and muttered among themselves. Then one of the men raised the hammer in his hand and threw it at the floor-to-ceiling window. The glass shattered. They stormed inside. The neighbor was probably doomed. When they came back out, each of them happily carried heavy bags of rice and flour. The last strong man had blood on him. He carried the blood-covered neighbor out of the house as well. One of the strong men angrily said, "Didn't they bring a lot of supplies here a few days ago? Where did all of it go? They must be hiding somewhere else. Maybe they're watching this place from somewhere right now." After saying that, he looked around the yard. Then they left. I was covered in cold sweat. For a moment, it felt as though he had looked directly at me. Dad and Mom were silent, their faces heavy. Mom finally came back to her senses. They took Lee Layasin away. Lee Layasin was the third son of the Lee family, the neighbor next door. Everyone nearby called him Lee Layasin. On the surveillance screen, there was still a pool of blood in the yard. The blood trail extended from inside the house to the gate. Lee Layasin had already been killed. Then what was their only purpose in taking him away? I didn't dare think about it. Dad said calmly, "Don't try to be a great savior." Mom immediately ran to the kitchen and vomited into the sink. I forced down my own nausea and quietly sat on the sofa. After a long time, Mom returned. After what had happened to Lee Layasin that afternoon, none of us had any appetite. We went to our rooms and rested early. Lying on my bed, I continued scrolling through my phone. The outside world had already been turned upside down. The #1 trending topic on Weibo was the supermarket. I clicked on it. The supermarket owner from earlier had posted a video showing how much stock he had. The supermarket shelves were completely full, and there were probably even more supplies in the warehouse. The owner hadn't appeared on camera, but his voice sounded oily and proud. He said that as long as someone was willing to pay, he would give them some supplies. When I heard his prices, I sucked in a breath of cold air. One bag of chips cost 1,000 yuan. What a heartless businessman. Perhaps he still hadn't realized that he didn't know how long the apocalypse would last. Money was the most useless thing in the apocalypse. I opened my bag of chips and continued reading the comments. Without exception, everyone was cursing the supermarket owner. But the owner didn't care. He even replied to one comment. "If you're a brother, come and chop me." He even pinned the comment. I kept scrolling. Eventually, I got bored and exited. I started looking at the zombie situation in different places. Almost every city had zombies now. At the moment, the countryside was still safe. The more remote the countryside, the safer it seemed. Many people online were calling for the establishment of safe zones in rural areas. They hoped to build safe zones in villages backed by mountains. But supplies couldn't be delivered there. Everyone was desperately looking for a solution. The more I read, the more anxious I became. I decided to put my phone down and sleep. But then I noticed a trending topic. The discussion had suddenly changed too. Supermarket address. Curious, I clicked on it. The supermarket owner had already deleted the video. Apparently, someone had used the arrangement of the supermarket shelves in the video and the IP address to deduce the supermarket's exact location. They had posted the specific location in the comments under the video. The owner must have seen it and panicked, so he deleted the entire video. But many people had probably already seen the address. Screenshots of the location were spreading everywhere. For the supermarket owner, tonight was destined to be a sleepless night. Sleepiness came over me. I put down my phone and went to sleep. On the second day after the zombie outbreak, I woke up early. I got dressed and walked into the living room. I took over from Dad and told him to go to sleep. Bored, I went into the kitchen and prepared a hot bowl of noodles for breakfast. I took out a packet of instant ramen from the cabinet. Once the water boiled, I added the noodles. Then I put in 1 egg for each person. After cooking them, I served the noodles. I ate the steaming noodles while watching Empresses in the Palace Asterisk. By the time I had finished watching, it was already noon. Dad had gotten up. He and Mom were busy in the kitchen. They said they were making my favorite tomato braised beef. Our family chatted and laughed as we finished lunch. Suddenly my uncle called. He gave us the exact location of their abandoned water tower. They had watched the news and felt that there were no zombies and no other people around them. My parents talked with my uncle about their recent situation. I picked up my phone again and started scrolling through Weibo. This was the most convenient way for me to understand what was happening in the outside world. I didn't know how long the internet would continue working. The supermarket owner posted another video. At first, I thought it was another video showing off his supplies. But when I opened it, I saw a slightly overweight man tied up and kneeling on the ground. His face was covered in tears. He was crying and shouting, "Please let me go." His expression became increasingly terrified. A strong man appeared in the video, holding a large machete. He raised it over the overweight man's head and brought it down. The man's head fell to the ground and rolled toward the feet of the strong man. The man didn't care at all. He kicked the blood-covered head away with his foot as casually as if he were kicking away some piece of trash. Blood splattered everywhere, yet no one bothered to clean it up. The video ended there. These people had already killed someone on the second day of the zombie outbreak. If this was only the beginning, how much more brutal would they become in the later stages of the apocalypse? After the food in the North District was eaten up, people there would eventually have to come out looking for supplies. How many of them would think of the South District as such a perfect place to hide? Our residential complex was the only one in the entire South District. It was also the best place to take shelter from the zombies. This neighborhood would probably inevitably become the site of a battle for resources. And it had nothing to do with the zombies. It would be a battle between humans. On the 5th day of the zombie outbreak, someone on Weibo summarized the zombies' current characteristics. First, their eyes turned white and their eyesight became weak. They sensed living people through hearing and smell. Second, they didn't eat other creatures. Primates were their only targets. They also seemed uninterested in dead people and wouldn't attack them. Third, just like the zombies in television shows and movies, they felt no pain and had absolutely no intelligence. However, they weren't slow. The only way to truly kill a zombie was to destroy its head. Fourth, there had been no evolved zombies and no mutations. Fifth, they weren't afraid of light. Sixth, anyone bitten or scratched by a zombie or whose wound came into contact with a zombie's bodily fluids would become infected. A person bitten or scratched would transform immediately, while infection through contact with bodily fluids could happen at an uncertain time. I was recording the zombies' characteristics and distribution every day as if I were following a TV series. Even when I was studying for the graduate entrance exam, I had never been this diligent. Living in the basement was simply not as convenient as living in a high-rise building. There was no way for me to use binoculars to observe what was happening outside, so I couldn't be the first person to record everything. On the 7th day of the zombie outbreak, the internet had already stopped working. Living in the basement, our connection with the outside world had completely been cut off. We stayed in the basement for several days and nothing unusual happened. To prepare for a possible power and water outage, we decided to organize our supplies and renovate the basement. Before the zombie outbreak, Dad had bought a vacuum sealing machine. I took out some labels and stuck them on food that wouldn't spoil easily, marking the expiration information, and placed it along the row closest to the wall. Mom took the meat products that could spoil easily out of the freezer and handed them to Dad to vacuum seal. That way, if the refrigerator stopped working, we wouldn't have to worry about eating everything immediately. Organizing all the food took the entire day. We piled all the garbage we produced outside the large iron door. That had recently become one of our biggest problems. We hadn't figured out how to deal with household waste while living in the basement. We didn't dare take it outside and throw it away casually. Especially these past few days, people from the North District had begun heading toward the South District. The deserted South District had recently been filled with cries for help. Some of them sounded very close to us, but none had appeared within the range of our surveillance cameras. I estimated that within 3 days, our neighborhood would receive some unwelcome visitors. Recently, Mom had washed all the clothes and blankets in the basement and taken them into the yard to dry. We hadn't entered the villa to avoid leaving footprints or causing scratches, so we only tied the clothes to iron poles in the corners of the yard. We were preparing ourselves to stay inside for at least half a month. Dad reset the password of the hidden door inside the wardrobe. There might be something in the villa containing our family members' birthdays. If someone figured out the password, there would basically be only one outcome for us: death. On the 9th day of the zombie outbreak, more and more people entered the South District, and the number of zombies gradually increased. Cars frequently sped through the streets, crushing zombies into bloody messes. At first, seeing that made me nauseous. Now I could watch it while eating. Just as I finished a packet of beef jerky, someone arrived outside our neighborhood. Of course, many people had tried to get into the complex over the past few days. Usually, they would drive to the entrance and observe the place, but they didn't have the courage to get out and push open the iron gate. Of course, they couldn't push it open anyway. Then they would speed away. But this time 4 vans arrived. I couldn't tell how many people were inside. One after another, they stopped at the entrance and used the vehicles as cover. 2 or 3 men got out and worked together to push the iron gate. When they discovered that the gate was locked, one man angrily kicked it. The loud clang of the iron gate attracted the nearby zombies. The zombies surrounded the vehicles and violently slammed against the windows. Their numbers kept increasing. Some zombies even began piling on top of each other, desperately trying to climb onto the vehicles. The 2 men immediately hid inside the van. The number of zombies grew so large that all 4 vans were surrounded. I stared at the surveillance monitor in confusion. Then they suddenly released a large amount of blood. Blood? Why did they have blood with them? The zombies smelled it and began rushing toward the last van in large numbers. The first 3 vans successfully escaped the zombie swarm. I immediately understood. It was human blood. Then something bloody was thrown out of the trunk. It was tied to the back of the van with a thick rope. The zombies immediately pounced on it. It was a person. They had actually tied a human being to the back of the van. The van drove forward without hesitation. The rope dragged the blood-covered person along the ground, leaving a long trail of blood. The person kept struggling. He was alive. The van didn't stop, it simply continued driving forward, although at a slower speed. They wanted to use this person to lure the zombies away from the neighborhood and take them somewhere else. After the van disappeared, all that remained was the trail of blood. I had watched countless cars crush zombies before, but this time I just stood there, staring blankly at the bloodstains outside the neighborhood. A living person had been tied to the back of a vehicle and dragged all the way along the road. My entire body went cold. I knew exactly what their goal was. They wanted to enter our neighborhood. Could people like this still be called human? After the incident where a living person had been dragged behind a vehicle, we decided to completely seal ourselves inside the basement. Mom brought all the clothes back inside and silently restored the villa to the appearance of an unoccupied house. I stood outside the storage room waiting for Mom to return, then checked whether the hidden door was completely closed. Before closing the hidden door, I swept some fine dust from the basement and used a hair dryer to spread it evenly across the storage room, creating the appearance that no one had stepped inside. Dad waited for us at the basement entrance. Together, we closed the large iron door, locked it with chains, braced it with door blockers, and finally piled all the mechanical equipment in front of it. Although the basement had soundproofing materials, I still put things like potato chips that could easily make noise away. I removed the packaging from the food we had been eating recently and stored everything in sealed food containers. Then we sat in front of the surveillance monitors and waited for an entire day, staring at the vehicles coming and going near the neighborhood entrance. But we didn't see those people. After causing such a huge disturbance the previous day, they didn't take any action today. Even after dark, they never appeared. During dinner, Dad and I discussed the possibility of launching a night attack. The possibility was low. Night belonged to the zombies. So we decided to continue taking turns with one person staying awake at night. On the 11th day of the zombie outbreak, 2 days had passed. Every day I wished I could stare at the surveillance monitors for 24 hours, but no one came. Our family had only just finished eating a bag of rice. Mom roughly counted our supplies every day. She believed that seeing all those supplies neatly stored away made her feel secure. What are we eating today? I followed the smell into the kitchen. Mom lifted the lid of the pot. It was hairy crab. It smelled amazing. Yesterday, we had found a gift box of hairy crabs in a corner of the refrigerator, so we cooked all of them. I could still eat hairy crab in my bedroom. Life felt wonderful. Dad was sitting on the sofa, holding my tablet. Come here for a moment. Reluctantly, I put down my hairy crab and happily ran over to Dad. Dad didn't answer me. Instead, he handed me the tablet and brought up a surveillance area. Pointing toward the wall, he asked, "Your eyesight is good, take a look yourself, what is that?" I followed where Dad was pointing and carefully examined the screen. My heart tightened. At some point, a ladder had appeared beside the wall in this corner. The ladder was slightly taller than the wall and was leaning against it. It was definitely a ladder. These past few days, I had been constantly watching the surveillance cameras covering the main entrance. I only glanced at the cameras covering the other areas, so I hadn't noticed the ladder in this corner. Dad and I immediately divided up the work and carefully checked every area within the surveillance range. There were ladders placed beside the walls at several corners of the neighborhood. But there was no one inside. I marked the locations of the ladders on a map. There were 5 in total, and they were far apart from one another. When I connected their locations with lines, I discovered that the ladders had basically been arranged to surround the entire neighborhood. So that was what those people had been doing over the past 2 days. They hadn't appeared at the main entrance. They had been surveying the terrain around the outer perimeter of the neighborhood. We had been careless. I originally thought that when they used a living person to lure the zombies near the main entrance, they were planning to enter through the gate. I never expected that the gate was merely a distraction. They wanted to climb over the walls. They planned to stay here for a long time. Dad's words made me think deeply. Staying here long-term won't be easy. We quickly held a small emergency meeting. I took out the map and showed everyone the positions of the ladders. At first, I thought they couldn't open the main gate, so they were climbing over the wall. But Dad was right. Now I agreed with him even more. They were using the walls not because they couldn't open the gate, but because they wanted to avoid damaging it. That way, the entire neighborhood would become a safe zone for them. Then would they search the entire neighborhood? Mom asked. Dad nodded. Only our family had a furnished house. That made us easy targets. There were no zombies inside the neighborhood, so all those tricks from novels and television shows involving zombies were useless. And apart from our family, there was no one else living in the neighborhood. We were hiding in the basement. If we wanted to drive those people away, it would be almost impossible. At the moment, we had no emergency plan. The only thing we could do was avoid being discovered as much as possible. We thought about it for a long time. Then Mom called me to eat the hairy crab. I slowly walked over. But the hairy crab no longer smelled delicious. Suddenly, the tablet made a loud sound. Dad and I immediately put down our bowls and chopsticks and ran toward the tablet on the sofa. A man's head appeared above the wall. He looked around carefully. Then he threw down a large cardboard box. 2 boxes fell to the ground, and blood immediately began flowing out of them. Bright red blood spread across the ground. There was no need to guess what was inside. Seeing that no zombies were approaching, the man turned around and signaled. Another man quickly climbed over the wall. He was holding a long bamboo pole. A sharp knife was tied to the end of it. The man with the knife walked around the boxes several times. He didn't care at all about the blood around them. The blood had already stained the bottom of his pants. One man after another climbed in using the ladders. There were 13 people in total. They were carrying various knives and other weapons, and each person had a backpack on his back. Those backpacks probably contained all their supplies. The group stayed close to the wall and carefully moved forward. After they disappeared, only the dirty, bloody footprints beneath the wall remained, along with the 2 cardboard boxes that were still bleeding. The knife man led the group around the wall. They confirmed that there were no zombies inside the neighborhood. Then they reached the main entrance. Brother Chen, look, the gate really is locked. A short, dark, heavy-set man pulled at the iron lock and spoke to the man behind him. Chen said nothing. He simply walked toward the security room. A few minutes later, he came out with a grim expression. There was no one living in the security room, but the door was locked from the inside. That meant someone inside the neighborhood had locked it. The men immediately became alert and carefully scanned their surroundings. Don't split up, we don't know how many people are inside, we'll search from the main entrance if we find anyone. Chen made a gesture across his throat. This group really was ruthless. The 13 men formed a line and began searching the villas closest to the main entrance. They searched house after house. Since most of the houses were empty and had nowhere to hide, they quickly searched half of the neighborhood. When they reached the small park in the center, the knife man said, Brother Chen, it looks like no one has moved into these houses either. The knife man sat down on the grass. The search had kept him tense the entire time. Chen looked back at the villas they had already searched and then stared at the unknown villas ahead. Judging by the shape of the houses, it was possible that they were also empty. The lock might have been installed by construction workers during the renovation. The heavy-set man also sat down on the grass, breathing heavily. Chen gave the knife man a look. You go ahead, if there's still no one ahead, we won't search anymore. Thankfully, Mom had told us to preserve the villa's original appearance and not raise the walls. Dad whispered that they were still about 5 houses away from us. The situation was still extremely dangerous. My eyes followed the knife man. He had already walked past 2 villas. He casually glanced at the last few villas. Perhaps he thought the remaining houses looked no different from the ones they had already searched. He turned around and went back. Brother Chen, there's no one in the villas ahead. The knife man put down the bamboo pole in his hand and sat down on the grass. Chen only nodded. He put down his backpack and began searching through it. A few minutes later, he pulled out a compressed biscuit and slowly began eating. Apparently, they hadn't brought enough water. He walked over to the fountain in the neighborhood, drank a few mouthfuls of water, and continued eating his biscuit. Sure enough, their supplies were running low. But there were no supplies inside the neighborhood. There was no food, clothing, or water. I thought they wouldn't be able to stay here long term. Based on the amount of food they currently had, they could probably stay in the neighborhood for only 3 or 4 days before leaving. Dad shook his head. As long as there are fewer people, there will be more resources. I thought my neighbors would probably put on another show here. On the 12th day of the zombie outbreak, our neighbors rested in the villas near the small park. There were no surveillance cameras installed inside the villas, so we had no idea what they were planning. I regretted not installing cameras throughout the entire neighborhood. But in the morning, they still came out of the villas and lay peacefully on the grass in the park, enjoying the sunlight. I searched through the crowd for Chen. I couldn't find him. Then I started looking for the knife man. But after searching again, I couldn't find him either. Those two were probably plotting something inside the villa. Around noon, the knife man came out of the villa and stood in front of everyone. He spoke harshly. Everyone, hand over your supplies, we'll redistribute them. Although everyone in the group was a man, the knife man was the strongest among them. No one moved. Everyone gripped their backpacks tightly. No one wanted to hand over their supplies. A tall, thin man wearing glasses nervously said, "A few days ago you said that was the last time we would redistribute the supplies." After the man with glasses spoke, another young man who looked like a student also agreed. You clearly said the last distribution was the final one. We saved food by eating less all the way here. You eat whenever you want and now you want to redistribute our supplies again? Dream on. The knife man said nothing. He picked up his bamboo pole and stabbed the man with glasses. The blade pierced into the man's body. The knife man twisted his wrist, rotating the blade inside him. Then he pulled it out and repeatedly stabbed the man until he stopped breathing. Only then did the knife man stop. He wiped the blood splattered across his face and sinisterly curled the corner of his mouth. Casually he said, "Now he agrees to contribute his supplies." The student immediately snatched the dead man's backpack and quickly ran away. After a while he disappeared from sight. The knife man spat and was about to chase him. Then Chen came out. His face was gloomy, but he still had a smile on it. "Don't rush, we're all in this neighborhood anyway." He threw his own dried-out backpack onto the ground. "I'll hand mine over first. Does anyone else disagree with the distribution?" His eyes swept across the crowd. His smile made everyone feel uneasy. Everyone began throwing their backpacks onto the ground. I didn't care about watching them distribute the food. I searched everywhere for the student. Among that group, he was the only one with some courage and intelligence. He knew he couldn't survive in their hands, so he ran away. I couldn't find him anywhere. Where did this little brat run off to? Then I noticed him. Damn it, why is he at my house? The student was crouching quietly beneath the green tree outside our house, with half of his body exposed. He watched the small park and waited to make sure no one was coming. Once he confirmed that the knife man hadn't caught up with him, he quickly opened the backpack he had just stolen. He poured out all the food inside and sorted through it. Then he put the unwanted items back into the backpack and casually threw it outside our house. He was probably trying to create the impression that he had entered this house. How stupid. Or perhaps I had underestimated him. I brought up the surveillance footage from the small park. They were still distributing their so-called fair share of supplies. I switched back to the surveillance area where the student was hiding. Quietly I said, "If you don't figure out a way to climb out soon, you'll never get out." Just then Mom quietly came beside me. "Come eat. What are we having today?" As soon as I heard the word eat, I immediately put down my phone. In the apocalypse, being able to eat hot food cooked by Mom every day truly made me feel incredibly happy. Since Chen's group arrived, we hadn't cooked stir-fried dishes at home for several days. The smell of cooking oil was too obvious. Who knew whether someone among them had an unusually strong sense of smell? Today, Mom cooked several kinds of dumplings. They were steaming hot. They tasted even better dipped in vinegar. She also made a large pot of seaweed and egg soup. Dad and Mom decided to save some dumplings for the new year. We hadn't celebrated a normal new year in a long time. No one knew when the apocalypse would end or when humanity would finally be able to welcome an ordinary new year again. After dinner, I performed my only useful job in the kitchen. I washed the dishes. Dad and Mom went to rest. I projected the surveillance footage from my tablet onto the television and curled up on the sofa to watch Empresses in the Palace *. I figured I should learn a thing or two about schemes from the women in the palace. Just when the next scene was about to begin, I paused it and stood up to get some water. While checking the surveillance footage, I noticed several more people. It looked like they were patrolling. The neighborhood was so large. Chen's group didn't have enough people to guard every corner. I silently hoped that the student had already escaped. I wasn't worried that Chen would search the houses again. One person had already died from their group, and everyone's supplies had been forcibly divided among Chen and the others. Their group was no longer as united as before. Perhaps some of them were already planning to rebel. Chen wouldn't be foolish enough to continue ordering the others to search the neighborhood at this critical moment. We were safe for the time being. On the 16th day of the zombie outbreak, the weather became colder. Inside the basement, we all put on padded jackets and reduced how often we showered. Using solar energy to heat enough water for one shower required at least an hour. Chen and the others had found several villas near the park and moved inside them. They hadn't come out for several days. Their small backpacks probably couldn't hold enough clothes for the winter. I had also seen the backpack the student had carried. Apart from a pitiful amount of food, there was nothing else inside. When I installed the cameras, I had casually entered several villas. They had already been renovated. The floors, electrical wiring, and water systems had all been installed. But there was no furniture. The villas could block the cold wind, but they couldn't protect anyone from the cold. In the damp and chilly southern climate of City A, I didn't know whether they could survive the winter. Thinking about the student, I figured he had finally made a smart choice and left early. For the past few days, I hadn't seen him anywhere. Although this was the apocalypse, I didn't often see zombies. There were very few zombies around the entrance of the neighborhood. Recently, no vehicles had passed through the entrance either. If I weren't living in the basement, I might have thought that the zombies I had encountered during this period were nothing more than a dream. On the 20th day of the zombie outbreak, I had no idea whether Chen and the others were dead or alive. According to the timeline, if the zombie outbreak hadn't happened, I should have been sitting in an examination hall at school, writing down everything I had studied and trying to turn a year of studying into a graduate student identity. I really missed my student days. Then a heavy impact suddenly shattered my peaceful thoughts. I hurriedly searched for the source of the sound. At the neighborhood entrance, a large truck had appeared. It repeatedly slammed into the iron gate. Dad and Mom also heard the noise and came to the television. We nervously watched as the truck repeatedly rammed the gate. After watching for a while, I realized something was wrong. The truck wasn't actually trying to break through the gate. A truck this large could easily smash through the gate after only a few impacts if the driver truly intended to break in. Then Chen and the others appeared near the entrance. I immediately understood. They were creating a distraction. Making such a huge amount of noise would inevitably draw everyone's attention toward the main entrance. Chen and the others couldn't see that the vehicle outside was a large truck, so they naturally couldn't realize what was happening. Were they planning to climb over the wall again? I opened every surveillance camera that could capture the walls. Sure enough, at the corner where the knife man had first entered, I saw someone. It was the student. He had actually come back. So he had gone to get reinforcements. And now he had brought them back along the same route. The student was the first to climb over the wall. He said something to the person behind him. Another man's head appeared above the wall. I took a closer look. It was another familiar face. The reinforcements the student had brought were the strong men who had killed Li Laosin. Another bloody battle was about to begin. The leader brought his group of strong men into the neighborhood. They moved quickly and skillfully, jumping over the wall. Everyone immediately formed a line and stayed close to the wall. Once the last man safely landed, the leader made a phone call. The large truck stopped ramming the iron gate and drove away. They probably didn't plan to stay here long-term like Chen's group. They could also use Chen's group to deal with the other side for them. Looking at the situation, the knife man was probably the only one capable of fighting the strong men. The leader waved his hand. The others quickly formed teams of 5 and moved toward the nearest villas. The leader stayed in front, keeping watch, and then also entered a villa. Looking at the empty wall on the surveillance screen, if I hadn't personally witnessed the leader entering, I would have thought the truck had simply failed to break through the gate and driven away. Chen looked grim and waved his hand. Relax, the vehicle didn't break through. Everyone go back and rest. After leading everyone back, Chen called the knife man and the heavyset man over. The three of them quietly left the group and came to the security room. Brother, aren't we going back together? Why are we here? The heavyset man was confused. If you want to go back yourself. Chen glared at him. He picked up a brick from beside the grass and handed it to the knife man. Break the door. Wouldn't smashing the glass be faster? I'm worried it will attract the zombies. Chen was silent for a moment. Then he said, I told you to smash it, stop talking so much. The knife man used the brick to smash the lock several times. The lock broke. The three men quietly entered the security room. Once the surveillance cameras could no longer see anyone moving around, I called Mom and Dad into the living room and briefly explained everything that had just happened. With our complete view of the situation, we could roughly guess what the leader was planning. He probably intended to launch a night attack. The student should have already told the strong men that there were no zombies inside the neighborhood. Since they didn't know whether Chen's group contained any skilled fighters, attacking at night was the most convenient option. Besides, Chen's group had no idea that another group had already entered the neighborhood. Chen was a smart man. He had probably realized that something was wrong. When he told everyone to relax, he was likely using the new group as cover to buy time for his own actions. But we still couldn't completely figure out Chen's intentions. Perhaps he believed the security room was close to the entrance, making it convenient for escape. Perhaps he believed the security room contained weapons that could protect him. Or perhaps he believed the most dangerous place was the safest place to hide. Whatever the reason, tonight was destined to be a nightmare. There was another thing we had to worry about. If the strong men took control of the neighborhood, would they thoroughly search this empty complex? And if they discovered a villa that actually had residents inside, would they turn our house upside down looking for us? After witnessing those strong men brutally kill Li Laosin, I was even more wary of them than Chen. We decided that our entire family would stay awake in the living room that night. I moved all the blankets onto the sofa. It was cold and getting sick would be easy. We didn't have much medicine, so we needed to stay warm during the night. Dad checked the iron door and continued piling objects against it. Mom cooked steaming hot noodles. The warmth of our home separated us from the cold outside. Night fell. The leader began his operation. They came out one after another, carrying weapons, moving silently through the darkness. The villas where people lived all had their lights on. At night, those lights were extremely obvious. The strong men skillfully divided into teams and headed toward the villas with lights on. Screams tore through the silent night. Then came begging and crying. After 20 minutes, everything became quiet again. Chen quietly emerged from the security room and walked toward the iron gate. He took out a key and unlocked it. The security room actually had a key to the gate. Chen pushed the gate open just enough for himself to squeeze through. He went outside and lightly knocked on the gate. The heavyset man and the knife man also managed to squeeze through. But they didn't leave immediately. Instead, they quickly pushed the gate wider. They wanted to open it completely. Only after the gate was fully opened did they leave. I angrily said that people had just been killed here, and the smell of blood would definitely attract the zombies. Sure enough, the zombies nearby seemed to smell the blood. They rushed toward the neighborhood in a frenzy, roaring. Without the others' voices, the sounds of the zombies roaring and running were especially clear in the quiet night. The leader's expression immediately darkened. "Go everyone to the wall." Everyone quickly rushed toward the wall. There were no ladders on the inside of the wall. They could only use one person as a base and step onto that person's shoulders to climb over. The leader repeatedly looked back at the approaching zombies. "Move faster." But what shocked me was that the leader didn't climb the wall first. Instead, he stayed behind to cover his brothers. As the zombies approached, most of the people had already climbed onto the wall. One zombie suddenly sprinted toward the leader. "Boss, jump." A strong man stretched out his hand and shouted nervously. Just as the zombie was about to pounce on the leader, he jumped up and grabbed the man's hand. Everyone pulled together and dragged him onto the wall. Before anyone could recover from the danger they had just experienced, dozens of zombies had already gathered around the wall. While the noise hasn't gotten too big, everyone get down. The leader breathed heavily. Everyone immediately followed the order and climbed down the ladder in an organized manner. The leader was still the last one. No one questioned him. It was obvious that the leader often stayed behind to cover the others. When it was finally his turn, he suddenly lifted the ladder. He threw it back into the neighborhood. "Boss, what are you doing? Aren't you leaving?" Everyone looked at him in confusion. The leader gave a difficult smile. Then he said firmly, "You all have to live well in my place." After saying that, he fell backward. His body landed directly among the zombies. Everyone was completely shocked. Some people even wanted to climb back onto the wall, but the more rational ones pulled them away and cursed as they dragged them into the darkness. I saw that when the leader jumped, one of the zombies scratched his leg. But I never expected him to end his own life so decisively. It was difficult to describe what kind of person he really was. On the first day of the zombie outbreak, he had led his brothers to our house to steal our supplies. He had killed Lee Laosin. Just half an hour earlier, they had killed everyone inside the villas. Their bodies were covered in blood. Yet every time they appeared, the leader was always at the front. Every time they left, he was always the one staying behind. And after being scratched, he decisively gave up his own life. In the apocalypse, good and evil could no longer be used to describe a person so simply. After dawn, we carefully counted the zombies visible in the surveillance areas. After the killing last night, the blood had attracted large numbers of zombies from the surrounding area. They wandered through every corner of the neighborhood. The main gate had also been opened. From outside, people could now see the zombies wandering inside. Most likely, no one would enter the neighborhood again. "Dad, Mom, we can finally embrace the sunlight again." Mom hugged me tightly and began crying. Too many things had happened during these days. After repeatedly confirming that the zombies couldn't break through the walls around our yard, we opened the basement's iron door and walked into the sunlight. I couldn't completely open my eyes, but I could breathe the fresh air. It made me feel like I had come back to life. On the 52nd day of the zombie outbreak, a plane recently flew over our neighborhood. It brought a broadcast. "Citizens, please pay attention. The country has built a large-scale safe base in City A. Citizens who can hear this broadcast may proceed to the safe base on their own. The base provides regular meals and medical care. You are welcome to come." I was extremely excited and immediately shared the news with Mom and Dad. Dad was also happy, but he didn't plan to go to the base. "Our family has enough supplies, there's no need to take the risk of going to the base." I nodded. Our supplies might even be greater than those at the safe base. Besides, we couldn't carry all these things with us. At the safe base, they could only guarantee our basic safety. We couldn't predict what kind of conflicts between people might happen after arriving there. So we decided not to go to the safe base. We would leave our supplies for those who needed help more. The day should be coming soon. On the 136th day of the zombie outbreak, the water, electricity, and internet were restored. Safe bases had been established across the country. The government was organizing everything in an orderly manner. The military began large-scale operations to shoot the zombies. Research institutes accelerated their efforts to develop an antidote. A new beginning for humanity was arriving. On the 190th day of the zombie outbreak, the country announced that the antidote had been successfully developed. It was increasing production and arranging for every citizen to receive it. There were no longer any zombies visible on the streets. Everyone came outside and embraced every person who had survived. Every person they hugged felt like an old friend they had known for years. They exchanged greetings. "What a beautiful day today. What a beautiful day today. And tomorrow will be one too."